Welcome to Crime-Alyze. Today I'll be analyzing the case of Oakey, Albert Kite Jr. The suspect in this case is this man. This was drawn based on the description of a witness in this case. Take a close look at this suspect because I will be talking about this suspect. The victim in this case is Oakey Albert Kite. He's also known by Al. So this is him. I am dissecting one of the most chilling, methodical, and deeply disturbing cold cases in American history with this case. It is a case that has baffled the FBI and local detectives and seasoned profilers such as yourself for over 2 decades. It is the May 2004 murder of the 53-year-old Oakey Albert Kite Jr. in Aurora, California. On the surface, Albert Kite was a normal, well-liked accountant and project engineer. He was a man who smiled often, worked hard, and was starting a new chapter in his life. But beneath the quiet exterior of his suburban townhouse lay a horror scene so structured, so calculated, that it points not to a common criminal, but to a professional operative trained by a brutal state apparatus. Today, we aren't just reciting old case files. We are introducing a definite theory. We are shifting the spotlight from old profiles toward a highly specific pipeline of nearly state-sponsored terror. The secret police forces of Cold War-era Eastern Europe, specifically communist Romania and the former Yugoslavia. To understand this killer, I showed you a sketch. We must first look at how the crime came to light. On Monday, May 24 of 2004, Albert Kite failed to show up to his accounting job, or he was also a project manager, an engineer. For anyone else, a missed morning might be a late alarm. For Albert, who had a 3-decade record of absolute punctuality, it was an immediate emergency. His concerned co-workers drove to his townhouse at South Helena Street. His pickup truck was missing. The front door, the garage, and all the windows were securely locked from the outside. There were absolutely no signs of forced entry. When police forced their way inside for a welfare check, the main floor of the home appeared immaculately neat, except for one stark anomaly in the kitchen sink. Officers found several of Albert's kitchen knives submerged in a basin filled entirely with liquid bleach. Sitting alongside the blades were a drinking glass, a set of keys, and a metal honing rod, the tool which is typically used to realign or sharpen knife blades. The horror escalated when officers descended into the finished basement. In the basement bedroom, they found Albert Kite Jr. He had been elaborately bound, subjected to hours of excruciating torture, and ultimately executed. Blood splatter stained the floor, the walls, and reached as high as the ceiling. The forensic configuration of his bindings was complex. The killer had used an estimated 40 feet of rope to tie Al's hands to his ankles in complex cross patterns. He was bound twice above the knee and around his upper arms above the elbows. Al had suffered 11 distinct stab wounds through his eardrums, above his eyeballs, down into his shoulders, and across his torso. He had a massive laceration on the back of his head, and his throat was severed so deeply he was nearly decapitated. Crucially, the autopsy confirmed that none of the stab wounds or blunt force trauma were fatal. They were systematically inflicted for hours to ensure agonizing pain while keeping him fully alive and conscious, before the final cut was made to his throat. Now, in my estimation, he might have been held there in the basement by the suspect, by the killer, for approximately 6 hours. That's just my estimation. The crime scene cleanup tells us exactly who we are dealing with. This was not a crime of passion. This was an operational extraction and elimination protocol. After the murder, the killer completely untied the rope bindings and took them with him, leaving behind only one overlooked fragment on the carpet. He wiped down the entire basement to destroy latent fingerprints. He took the empty bottle of bleach and the household trash out with him. But in one of the trash cans in the house, the police found the rental contract. So this rental agreement should actually have the fingerprints of the suspect on it, but I have not been able to obtain information about that. If anybody of you knows whether or not fingerprints were on that rental agreement which was found inside the house, let me know in the comments. The suspect then took a shower in Al's bathroom to wash away the blood. He took Al's bath towels with him, and he stole a pair of Al's pants and wore one of Al's shirts out of the house. So the suspect in this case, he took a shower, he washed off all the blood, and he didn't bring any fresh clothes with him, so he actually put on one of Al's shirts and one of Al's pants, and he took all the trash with him. He also took the towels with him, and he went into Al's GMC truck and he drove off. So the suspect drove away in Al's 1983 GMC Sierra pickup truck, taking Al's wallet and cell phone with him. At 9:59 p.m. on May 22, the killer used Al's debit card at a Wells Fargo ATM nearby. He withdrew exactly $1,000. The suspect knew there would be a security camera, so he wore a ski mask and heavy gloves. He had tortured the PIN number out of Al during the execution window. Al's truck was found abandoned a few blocks away, and his phone was left inside a glass payphone booth at a Safeway grocery store. The phone had been strategically wiped and left where random passerbys would handle it, completely contaminating any forensic touch DNA. Despite this meticulous care, the killer made one critical mistake. On the staircase leading down into the basement, crime scene techs located a single isolated drop of blood. It did not belong to Kite. It belonged to the killer, likely from an accidental, self-inflicted cut during the violent struggle. So this drop of blood was found on the staircase leading down into the basement. For years, investigators looked at local anomalies, but when advanced DNA phenotyping and ancestral analysis were conducted on that staircase blood drop, the results blew the geographic scope of this case wide open. The DNA profile reveals that the suspect is of Southeast European descent, with lineage tracing tightly back to the Balkan region. Geographically, this isolates a highly specific group of nations: Romania, Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Bosnia, the former Yugoslav republics. When FBI genealogy labs ran this profile through commercial and criminal databases in the United States, they hit a total brick wall. They could not find a single match, not even a third or fourth cousin. This is a profound clue. It tells us that this man does not have an established family tree in America. He is an immigrant who traveled to the U.S. alone, leaving his entire biological lineage back in Eastern Europe. To break this case, American authorities must coordinate directly with DNA databases and national labs inside Romania and the Balkan states to pinpoint his true family tree. Now let's look at the operational behavior. Weeks before the murder, Kite posted an advertisement in newspapers and online looking for a roommate to rent his basement bedroom. The suspect used the burner phone to respond under the alias Robert Cooper. The killer used this phone to contact roughly 100 different rental properties in the Denver area. Some profiles suggest these 100 calls were a decoy to obscure his targeting of Kite. I disagree. This was not a targeted hit on Kite from the beginning. The suspect was simply trolling for the perfect soft target. When the suspect visited Al's home for the first time, Al showed him the layout of the finished basement. The suspect realized instantly that the basement bedroom was soundproof. In fact, Aurora detectives later tested this by standing in that exact basement bedroom and screaming at the top of their lungs. Not a single sound could be heard in the adjoining townhomes or out on the street. The killer didn't target Kite, the man. He targeted Kite's basement because it provided an insulated chamber where he could torture a human being for 6 hours in total secrecy. The killer would not have been able to do that in somebody's house or apartment which did not have a basement. But there was another meeting. Out of those 100 phone calls, which Robert Cooper, the man who called himself Robert Cooper, the 100 phone calls which Robert Cooper made there with prospective landlords, there was one meeting with one of these landlords, And one of these people was a female professor at the University of Denver. Crucially, this professor taught the Romanian language. During their face-to-face interaction, she noted that the man spoke with a distinct native accent. When she spoke to him and asked about his origin, he explicitly confirmed to her that he was Romanian. Crime-Alyze is actively launching a private initiative to locate and interview this professor, to privately interview this professor about every micro detail of the conversation she had with the suspect. If the suspect did speak Romanian fluently, it confirms our geographic target that he was born, raised, and was operational inside Romania. Let's look at the psychology of state-sponsored sadism. Why did the suspect execute this crime? Some investigators proposed that the torture was designed to extract information from Albert Kite, or that it matched a specific militant method from Turkey known as falaka, a technique involving systematic foot beating using a hard rod, or in this case, the sharpening iron found in L sink. But let's look deeper into the historical timeline of Eastern Europe. The methods of falaka and systematic sensory and physical destruction were heavily utilized by the Secret Service networks and security directorates of communist dictatorships, most notoriously the Securitate in communist Romania and the UDBA in Yugoslavia. Our theory is direct. The suspect is a former operative or enforcement asset of the Romanian secret police, or a branch of the Yugoslav military intelligence networks. Consider the dates. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and Nicolae Ceausescu's brutal Romanian dictatorship collapsed in a violent revolution in December 1990. The Balkan Wars and Serbian military conflicts raged throughout the 1990s, concluding around 1998. When these regimes collapsed, thousands of highly trained state torturers, interrogators, and shadow enforcers suddenly found themselves unemployed, stripped of power and scrubbed from official records. Many fled across the globe to escape war crimes, tribunals, or populist retaliation. This suspect, entered the United States under a false identity, possibly carrying an elite operational skill set directly into the American suburbs. Look at the psychological profile. Albert Kite was a simple accountant or project engineer or project manager. He had different positions. He did not possess corporate secrets, government codes, or hidden millions. The $1,000 which the killer took from the ATM was exactly the same amount that the killer had paid to Al days earlier as a rental deposit. It was simply operational cash to fund his escape transit. The torture was not an interrogation for information. It was a psychological compulsion. Individuals recruited into the deep architecture of totalitarian secret police forces frequently possess deep-seated pathological traits of sadism and control. For decades, this man's identity was validated by having absolute state-sanctioned power over bound captives in underground interrogation rooms. When he was forced into civilian life in America, his internal anger festered. He needed to vent his sadomasochistic urges. He hunted for a soft target. He rented an isolated basement and recreated the exact environment of his 1980s secret police operations. This also perfectly explains the bizarre cleaning ritual. Why submerge the knives in bleach? Why shower and wipe down every surface with clinical precision? In the dark rooms of the Securitate or military black sites in Romania or Eastern Europe, operatives were strictly required to clean the physical disarray and biometa immediately after an interrogation session to keep the facility operational and scrub unauthorized evidence. This man did not learn how to clean a crime scene from watching television documentaries. He cleaned Al Kite's home because it was an ingrained professional muscle memory from his years serving a shadow regime in Romania. Al Kite was an innocent man who crossed paths with a wandering international monster. More than 20 years later, this man is still out there, hiding behind a web of stolen identities. But he left his DNA behind. Our channel is not letting this rest. We're actively attempting to coordinate private interviews with Al's inner circle, his ex-wife, his girlfriend Linda, his daughter, and his extended family, to map out if any external financial or professional connection was overlooked. More importantly, we're searching for the Romanian language professor from the University of Denver to unlock the true identity of the man who called himself Robert Cooper. If you have any information regarding this case, or if you know of an individual from the Balkan or Romanian diaspora who arrived in the United States around the turn of the millennium, so the year 2000, with a military or state intelligence background and a distinct limp or cane, contact the Metro Denver Crime Stoppers at 720-913-7867. Let us look closer at the sheer calculated patience of this suspect, the Phantom. The killer didn't just stumble onto South Helena Street where Al lived. He meticulously scouted the layout of Denver. It all began in March 2004 when the suspect walked into a 7-Eleven convenience store located directly adjacent to the University of Colorado hospital. There, he purchased a simple burner cell phone. He purchased a prepaid cell phone. But he didn't turn it on right away. He waited exactly 31 days to activate this prepaid phone. Why? Because he knew that this specific store's surveillance system automated a cyclical rewrite that deleted security footage after exactly 30 days. By the time local police pulled cell tower pings to find out where the phone originated, the physical tape of him buying it was already scrubbed from existence. This reveals a tactical knowledge of retail loss prevention systems that very few common citizens possess. Once active, that single burner phone or prepaid phone became an engine of predation. Tower pings show the suspect moving aggressively between distinct high-density neighborhoods, hunting through real estate listings and local library corkboards near the University of Colorado Medical Center and the University of Denver campus. He cast a massive net, placing roughly 100 calls to independent homeowners who were advertising private homes or basements for lease. He was isolating a specific vulnerability, a single, friendly adult living alone with a highly isolated home layout. Al Kite's home provided a soundproof basement bedroom matching the monster's strict operational requirements. Al wasn't targeted for who he was. He was selected because his home layout provided the perfect kill chamber. When we examine the forensic state of Al's townhouse, we aren't looking at a chaotic crime scene. We're looking at a classic state-sponsored cleanup directive. If our theory holds true, this man was a product of the Securitate, the notoriously brutal secret police force of communist Romania under Nicolae Ceausescu, or an asset of the military intelligence apparatus active during the late 1990s Balkan conflicts. In those totalitarian deep state frameworks, internal enforcers operated under strict standard operating procedures. Interrogations and extractions were designed to break a captive's psychological compliance entirely through maximum physical trauma without causing premature cardiac arrest or blood loss failure. The use of the metal honing rod to systematically assault the exposed bottoms of the feet directly mirrors falaka, an extreme trauma application utilized extensively across black sites in Eastern Europe and Turkey to maintain total dominance over state prisoners. Even more revealing is the cleanup pattern. In the safe houses of the Securitate, operatives were explicitly drilled to execute full forensic countermeasures immediately following an interrogation. Okay, so this is very important. Why did he clean up this entire scene so meticulously? A lot of killers don't do that. Why don't they do it? Because they're not professionals. This man is a professional. So, one more time, even more revealing is the cleanup pattern in the safe houses of the Securitate. Operatives, intelligence operatives, were explicitly drilled to execute full forensic countermeasures immediately following an interrogation. The systematic soaking of structural cutlery in raw, undiluted chemical bleach, the washing down of non-porous basement surfaces, the removal of the victim's specific blood-soaked items, and the immediate bathing of the operatives on site to remove biological transfer are textbook military tradecraft over there in Romania and Eastern Europe. This man did not panic. He systematically sanitized his environment because he spent years operating within a system where chemical decontamination was a mandatory administrative protocol after a captive extraction. The composite sketches and surviving landlords. What makes this ghost so terrifying is his mastery of operational disguise. Out of the 100 landlords he contacted, the suspect met with 3 face-to-face. So with 3 landlords he met face-to-face. When detectives attempted to construct a definitive composite sketch using these eyewitnesses, they were met with frustrating contradictions that profile an operative consciously altering his visual baseline from meeting to meeting. One surviving landlord described a polished, well-dressed individual who appeared to be in his early 50s, walking with a pronounced limp and relying on a dark walking cane mobility. Yet another independent property owner described the exact same prospective renter using the phone number as a man clearly in his late 30s, displaying athletic movement and 0 physical impairment. His hair texture, facial lines, and apparent age shifted effortlessly. The limp and the cane were highly probable behavioral props used intentionally to project physical vulnerability, lower the landlord's natural instinctual guard, and make him appear utterly harmless during an initial property walkthrough. The single most critical crack in his facade occurred during his interaction with a female faculty member who taught Romanian at the University of Denver. While walking her property, she felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up as he made highly inappropriate, predatory remarks. But as an expert in the region, she instantly caught the unmistakable phonetics of a native Romanian accent bleeding through his speech. When she directly pressed him on it, his discipline slipped for a fraction of a second, and he explicitly confirmed that he was from Romania. The global investigation breaking through the wall of silence. This leads us to our definitive objective. The FBI's genealogy initiatives hit a total dead end in the United States because this man's biological family tree remains entirely rooted inside the borders of Europe. He has no domestic relatives in the United States. To solve the murders of Al-Qaeda, cross-border investigative channels must open. American forensics labs must bridge the gap to exchange data profiles directly with ancestral databases and criminal DNA registries inside Romania and the former Yugoslav republics. Our investigative team here at Crime-Alyze is actively executing a completely independent private sweep of available public and academic records to isolate and identify the exact name of the Romanian language professor who stood face to face with this monster in 2004. We are also tracing public records to locate and interview Al-Qaeda's maternal and paternal cousins and extended family branches. We want to know if there was any hidden thread, any international accounting transaction, or any old family tie that could explain how an elite Eastern European shadow operative crossed paths with a quiet accountant in Aurora, Colorado. The trail is old, but DNA does not lie. The single drop of blood left on those stairs remains a ticking clock for a killer who thinks he is a ghost. Let us dissect the chilling encounter between the man calling himself Robert Cooper and the Romanian language professor further. This was not a casual property viewing. It was an interrogation wrapped in polite conversation. When the suspect met this professor, he did not accidentally let his native phonetic baseline slip. He was checking her. He was mapping out whether she posed a threat to his operational security. Think about the psychological posture of an operative trained in surveillance. The moment he realized she was an academic specializing in his native region, Romania, his internal alarms went up. He spoke to her in subtle, calculated rhythms, intentionally testing whether she could pinpoint his exact sub-dialect. When she called him out on the unmistakable accents of the Balkan region, he did not panic. He instantly leaned into it, casually confirming he was Romanian to normalize the interaction, disarm her suspicion, and safely exit the property. He realized this woman possessed the specific cultural and linguistic intelligence to look rigid through his disguise. That is why he never called her back. He dropped her from his list of potential victims because she was too dangerous to keep alive in his orbit. The Balkan labyrinth, why international tracking fails. This regional profile brings us directly to the immense geographic and geopolitical wall that has kept this case cold for over 2 decades. The Balkan region is a complex web of borders, fragmented jurisdictions, and deep-seated historical upheavals. We are talking about an area that saw the violent splintering of the former Yugoslavia throughout the 1990s, alongside the restructuring of intelligence agencies across Romania and Bulgaria after the fall of communism. When the FBI ran the killer's DNA profile from that Denver staircase through domestic registries, they found absolutely nothing. Why? Because his entire lineage belongs to a region where centralized, accessible genetic databases are heavily restricted or entirely non-existent due to strict European privacy mandates. During the chaos of the Balkan conflicts and the collapse of the Romanian Securitate, millions of official records, military rosters, and physical fingerprint sheets were intentionally burned, weaponized, or deeply buried by fleeing operatives. Tracking an international ghost from this territory means fighting a fragmented bureaucratic maze where old identities were systematically wiped clean to protect war criminals and deep state enforcers. The university hub, a predator lurking in the shadows. But there is another highly disturbing geographic pattern hidden inside the data files of that activated burner phone. Out of the roughly 100 rental advertisements that the suspect reviewed and called, a disproportionately large number originated directly from the neighborhood grid surrounding the University of Denver. This is a massive tell regarding his daily movements. This tells us that the killer was not just passing through on a highway. He was actively roaming, nesting, and establishing a prolonged physical presence within the university district. A campus environment provides a transient operative with perfect operational cover. It is a high turnover neighborhood filled with constantly changing student housing listings, public bulletin boards, and internet cafes where an unregistered stranger can blend into the background without attracting a second glance. He used the university layout as a hunting ground, systematically combing through local cork boards and student housing flyers to profile potential soft targets who were completely unguarded. Hidden in plain sight, the mystery of the Denver selection. This raises a critical geographical contradiction that completely upends what we know about typical immigration patterns. When individuals arrive fresh from Romania or the Balkan states, they almost universally migrate toward established diaspora hubs in the massive coastal metropolises, cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or Houston, where existing cultural enclaves provide immediate support. Yet, this highly clinical predator chose Denver, Colorado, a city geographically isolated in the interior of the American West, far removed from standard Eastern European entry ports. Why hide in the middle of nowhere? Because it provided an absolute structural reset. Furthermore, eyewitness accounts universally confirm that the suspect spoke exceptional, highly fluent English with only a slight regional coloration. You do not acquire that level of localized linguistic fluidity, idioms, and situational comfort overnight. This absolute command of the English language indicates that the killer had likely been living, working, and assimilating deep inside the structural fabric of the United States for at least 3 to 5 years prior to 2004. He was already fully adapted to the American lifestyle. Technical countermeasures, the 30-day surveillance loop. Finally, let us confront the most calculated detail of his entry protocol, his knowledge of commercial security systems. As we established, the suspect purchased his prepaid phone at a local 7-Eleven and held it completely inactive for exactly 31 days to ensure the convenience store's video loop would be automatically deleting his physical image. Where does a foreign operative get that specific information? Let's clear up a common misconception. There is no state law or municipal mandate in Colorado requiring retail stores to delete surveillance footage after 30 days. Retail security retention policies are decided entirely by individual corporate entities based on local hard drive storage capacity and data management costs. In 2004, a 30-day overriding cycle was the standard corporate infrastructure blueprint for large convenience store franchises like 7-Eleven. The killer didn't study Colorado criminal statutes to pull this off. He possessed a highly sophisticated understanding of Western corporate surveillance networks. He knew exactly how commercial hard drives automated their data purges, and he used that corporate routine to completely blind the FBI. The blueprint of escape, the $1,000 tactical transit budget. Let us look closely at the math behind the money stolen on the night of May 22nd, 2004. At exactly 9:59 p.m., the killer bypassed the automated credit features of Al-Qaeda's debit card and executed a physical cash withdrawal of exactly $1,000. Although he could have withdrawn more than $1,000, he only opted to withdraw $1,000. This specific figure is an international pattern. In true crime, casual robbery motives are characterized by greed. The criminal cleans out every penny across multiple accounts, but this killer didn't touch Al's checking limits or retirement portfolios. Instead, he took only $1,000 in cash, which chillingly was the precise amount of money he had handed Al days earlier as his rental deposit. So clearly, that must have been the reason why he only withdrew $1,000, because he had given Al $1,000 a few days earlier. as a security deposit for the rental of the basement. It was an operational asset recovery. In the field manual of a covert state intelligence agent, cash is the ultimate currency of transit survival. Credit or debit transactions leave electronic crumbs across states. Hard paper bills buy Greyhound tickets, fuel from off-grid stations, and unregistered rooming houses without alerting federal interdiction nets. This $1,000 was his designated extraction budget, carefully calculated to drop him clean out of Colorado and slide him under the national radar. Autopsy secrets. The blade of a professional enforcer. All of this is written by myself. The physical autopsy profile completely destroys any lingering theories of a chaotic domestic assault. According to the medical examiner, Al Kite suffered 11 meticulous stab wounds, but it is the anatomical topography of these wounds that points directly to military issue methodology. The puncture tracking was highly specialized, focusing entirely on sensory neutralization, straight into the ears, directly above the orbital ridge of the eyeballs, down into the muscle structures of the shoulders, and deep across the upper torso. The blade itself left narrow, uniform tracking slices with zero secondary tearing. This profile does not indicate a jagged, serrated kitchen tool or a blunt pocket knife. It is structurally consistent with a slim, high-tensile, double-edged combat weapon such as a military tactical dirk or a specialized shadow regime stiletto blade used by Secret Service networks for deep tissue nerve compliance. The killer didn't stab Al to cause rapid blood failure. He engineered narrow tracking incisions to achieve absolute physical compliance while keeping Al fully awake for 6 agonizing hours. That's my estimate, 6 hours that Al was held and tortured for approximately 6 hours. The decoy vector, the timeline of Al's truck recovery. Let us look at the timeline of how the killer ditched Al's 1983 GMC Sierra pickup truck. The truck wasn't driven across state lines or found torched in a remote canyon. It was abandoned merely a few blocks away from the Helena Street townhouse in the 15300 block of East Evans Avenue. This reveals a brilliant piece of tactical misdirection. By leaving the vehicle within walking distance of the crime scene, the killer intentionally engineered a localized search radius. He knew that the moment local police found the truck close by, their immediate logistical assumption would be that the suspect fled on foot or integrated into a neighborhood hideout right next door. But the timeline tells a completely different story. The suspect used the truck to rapidly move his gear, his biological towels, and his contaminated clothes away from the primary kill zone. He drove directly to his true secondary extraction vehicle, which he had pre-staged on East Evans Avenue days prior. He abandoned Al's truck, transferred his sanitized gear into his clean car, and was already executing a high-speed transit route out of the Colorado state borders hours before Al's co-workers even realized he was missing. Fast check: the missing news clippings and media realities. Now, as investigative viewers of this channel, Crime-Alyze, know, you might be wondering, Can we pull up old newspaper clippings, images, or digitized print scans of the actual classified rental advertisements that Robert Cooper used to hunt his victims? The factual answer is a definitive no. There are absolutely no public news clippings, printed archives, or images of those classified ads available anywhere on the internet. In 2004, the Aurora Police Department and the FBI classified the physical rental applications, newspaper ad clips, and online server logs from the case file as active protected evidence. Because the suspect used false names, a fraudulent Indiana Social Security number, and entirely fake references, releasing the raw print ads could compromise current tracking profiles or lead to targeted internet harassment of the other 99 innocent Denver landlords who survived these phone calls. The physical remnants of those classified advertisements are locked away inside federal evidence vaults, shielded from the public eye. The shifting mask, chameleon tactics, and the chilling 20-year age gap. Let us address one of the most baffling contradictions in the entire investigative file. The massive variance in how eyewitnesses described this man's age. Some surviving landlords stated with absolute certainty that the suspect was a young man in his late 30s. Others just as confidently described him as a mature man well into his 50s. A 20-year age gap is an immense discrepancy for a single individual. How does a man cause that level of visual confusion without the obvious markers of aging? Remember, the suspect did not have a graying beard, he did not have a white mustache, and his hair was consistently described as dark brown or black, with absolutely no facial hair. He was completely clean-shaven. To understand this, look at his overall presentation. The suspect was a man who possessed what profilers call an alpha masculine, deeply severe physical build. He had a strong, hardened jawline, sharp facial features, and an intense gaze. When he stood up straight, moved with athletic precision, and spoke with high energy, he easily projected the vitality of a man in his late 30s. But when he chose to, he could completely shift his posture by consciously throwing on a heavy, loose-fitting jacket, letting his shoulders slump, dragging his leg to simulate a pronounced limp, and leaning heavily on his dark walking cane. He instantly added decades to his appearance. He weaponized human perception. He knew when people see a man struggling, he knew that when people see a man struggling with a cane, their brains automatically categorize him as older and harmless. It was a deliberate, masterfully executed physical disguise designed to throw off police sketches and lower the defenses of his targets. The contrast of evil, Israel Keys versus this Romanian professional. This tactical shape-shifting invites fascinating psychological comparison to another infamous American apex predator, Israel Keys. Keys operated with a similar logistical blueprint. He flew across the country. He buried hidden kill catches or weapons years in advance. He used prepaid phones, and he targeted completely random strangers to evade traditional police profiling. But when you look at Israel Keys, his physical profile was entirely different. Even well into his 30s, Keys possessed a boyish, highly deceptive, non-threatening face. He looked almost like an innocent 18-year-old teenager or a clean-cut college kid. Keyes relied entirely on that youthful boyish charm to blend into society and make his victims feel safe. The Aurora killer did not have that luxury. He didn't look like a teenager. He looked like a hardened, mature man who had seen real combat. He couldn't hide his intense, severe Eastern European features. So instead of trying to look young and innocent like Keyes, this suspect did the exact opposite. He used a fake limp, a walking cane, and a slumped posture to make himself look like an aging, frail 50-year-old man. It is a level of hyperconscious professional behavioral manipulation that points directly away from an amateur serial killer and points squarely toward the elite tradecraft of a state-sponsored shadow operative. Coding the blood, the European databases that can crack the case. So how do we finally catch a man who can change his age, his walk, and his name at will? The answer is locked entirely inside that single accidental drop of blood he left on Al-Qaeda's basement stairs. Because the FBI's domestic genetic genealogy searches hit a brick wall, the key to solving this case does not lie in American databases like GED Match or Family Tree DNA. This man's biological family tree remains entirely rooted in Europe. To tear down this wall of silence, investigative channels must cross the Atlantic and tap into specialized European genetic networks. We need to look directly at international forensic data exchanges and emerging investigative genetic genealogy frameworks within the Balkan region. Specifically, matching this DNA profile against criminal and civilian infrastructure databases in Southeast Europe, such as Romania's National Forensic DNA System, Sistemul Național de Date Genetice Judiciare, or the evolving forensic databases in Serbia, Croatia, and Bulgaria. If international investigators can bridge this bureaucratic gap and cross-reference his blood code with regional European family lineages, we will instantly find his true surname. We will uncover his real military records. This matrix of his false identity will collapse the moment his DNA touches his native soil. Which brings us to the ultimate truth of this case. It has been over 20 years since that horrific May weekend in Aurora, Colorado. 20 years of hiding, 20 years of looking over your shoulder for the suspect. If you know of any people who came from Romania or Yugoslavia in the mid-1990s or late 1990s or early 1990s or maybe late 1980s and who worked for the secret police or for intelligence services in Romania or Yugoslavia or Bulgaria, then this person could be the suspect that we're looking for. So if you know somebody like that, then put it in the comments below, and also call the number I gave you earlier of the police department in Denver. The unmasking of Oakey Albert Kite Jr. Let's look at Oakey Albert Kite Jr. To truly understand the gravity of this crime, we must look at the man who was targeted. Oakey Albert Kite Jr. was born on the 7th of May 1951 in Nash County in North Carolina. He grew up in Halifax County, North Carolina, an area heavily known for tobacco and cotton farming. After attending Weldon High School, Albert went on to major in business administration at Atlantic Christian College, known today as Barton College in the city of Wilson. Was Al just a standard retail or desk accountant? Absolutely not. His career was deeply embedded in highly complex industrial infrastructure and critical utility sectors. Right out of college in 1971, Al began working for Stone & Webster, a massive powerhouse engineering and industrial services corporation. So he was just 20 years old. He already got out of college. He was born in 1951 and got out of college already in 1971. His first assignment for the company took him straight to the Surrey nuclear power plant near Richmond, Virginia. He started his career there as a basic timekeeper, but was rapidly promoted through the ranks due to his sharp, meticulous mind. He eventually became a project accountant, then a project manager, and then an engineering consultant, moving to different critical engineering sites over a career that spanned more than 3 decades. So if in these 3 decades, let's say at an average you earn $6,000 to $10,000 per month, then that would have been per year, let's say about $60,000 to $100,000 or $160,000 to $120,000 per year. Over 10 years, that's 1.2 million. Over 30 years, that's about 3 million. Then he would have had to pay taxes. So let's say it left him 1.5 million. So after taxes, he maybe had earned about 1.5 million in those 30 years, approximately. This was a man, I'm talking about Albert, this was a man deeply comfortable tracking millions of dollars in highly technical corporate structures, a fact that makes his selection by an elite European operative even more mysterious. The academic counter-intel encounter. Let us address the specific identity of the academic who stood face to face with the killer. In the media file, she is frequently generalized as a local professor or a housing manager, but according to official police case data, the University of Denver faculty member who interviewed the suspect is a female professor. When the man calling himself Robert Cooper met with her to view her available rental property, her maternal and instinctual red flags immediately went up. As she walked him through the space, he began making inappropriate, highly predatory remarks that made her feel deeply unsafe. But it was her sharp background as an academic that cracked his operational security wide open. She instantly recognized the distinct phonetic baseline of a native Romanian speaker bleeding through his spoken English. So the suspect's English was pretty good. If it weren't good, he wouldn't have called himself Robert Cooper. So usually in the schools in Romania, they didn't teach English. So we're not sure where the suspect learned English. But my assumption is that the suspect had been living in the United States for at least 3 to 5 years prior to 2004. So he at least came to the United States maybe in 1999. When this female professor directly pressed him on it, asking him where he was originally from,